sure that's generated a fair few. Everyone's got yeah, we've got a roaming mic actually, so if you want to put up your hand, Justin's going to bring the mic around, and then Pat will answer your questions, so far away.
I just want to know what you think of the culture war being something which is insidious and slow and subversive, and something which can really pull apart your nature in a slow way, like the sifting of wheat.
Thanks. I think that's definitely what happens. I mean, a lot of these issues, especially in Australia, the media doesn't give much coverage to some of the disputes over controversial moral issues. It barely gets a blip on the radar. So in that sense, it's quite hard for I know a lot of friends of mine who find it difficult to kind of be inspired or get engaged too much in these sorts of things, because it's almost as if there's a mute over these sorts of issues in Australia. Very big difference in the States. These issues are kind of everywhere. So it's a very tangible culture war in the States. In some sense, it's because they've reached this tipping point, right? They've just had that many number of abortions. It's been that there for so long. They're just over it. So they've got this massive, huge youth connected movements of people getting together. In that sense, in Australia, we're a bit susceptible about that sort of danger, because it does operate on a very kind of below ground level. And a lot of us get kind of brainwashed by the media without us even really knowing it. If you talk to most people, and some of you here may judge things like embryonic stem cell research in terms of, the positive benefits that can come from it, people will often look to, or look at the consequences, look how many lives could be saved, or look at these proposed benefits from this sort of research. Surely that outweighs any possible harm that could take place. Without even knowing it, you've got a whole theory, a whole philosophy just kind of planted in people's minds of consequentialism, that we should judge things based on their consequences. And then there's also utilitarianism slipping in there, the philosophy that, the ends justifies the means, the greatest good for the greatest number. Now, people don't know the word utilitarianism or consequentialism, but they believe it. So in that sense, the culture war is quite dark, and it creeps in a lot. And that's why I began my talk with that question, saying, are we in a culture war? Like, who's dying? Because in that sense, we don't really see these things. They operate on a level which is a lot darker and sinister. But in that sense, we've got to be more proactive in identifying these kind of alarm bells that pop up, and then being able to convince others of the significance of engaging in these sorts of debates, and really bringing the culture war to the surface so that other people realise. Because people aren't inspired to join some kind of passive movement that does nothing. People have to realise that we are actually in a battle here. We're in a huge battle, forces of good and evil type thing. It's that kind of things that you see in Revelations. That's what's happening. So if we can convince young people of the importance of engaging in this sort of thing, then we can also convince them of the subtleties of the culture war.
I suppose I'm one of those church hoppers that you talked about earlier, and the question I wanted to ask was specifically relating to the point where you were talking about the culture war within inside the church. Part of the reason why I church hopped out of the Catholic Church, actually. But my diocese is Catholic in name only. I can tell you that you rarely will find a Catholic priest that's not liberal. The bishop is extremely liberal. Recavations through all the churches and all the rest of it, to the point where we have a Society of St. Pius X priest that turns up twice a month and in someone's garage, and there's people out the roller doors, So there's an issue with the diocese that I'm in. As a result, I couldn't in any good faith stay listening to non-orthodoxy anymore. So I left and went to a church where I believe that I'm getting an Orthodox Christian faith, maybe not Catholic in the true sense. My question is, for people who are braver than me and want to stay and fight, I suppose, how do you do that within your own church when all the odds are stacked against you, when the entire hierarchy is liberal? And I've got to tell you, it's not just in my diocese, there's many others across Australia, and I'm sort of probably not as optimistic as you are in terms of your belief that the liberalism's going out the back door. I think that it's actually surging in some areas. I am studying theology at the Broken Bay Institute, and I've got to tell you, I'm getting out of it very soon. But these are the institutions that are teaching lay Catholics from all over Australia, and God help us, they're teaching priests as well. So I wonder with that what hope we've got and how we're going to fight against that within the church.
Well, that's a very good question. It's a very big question. What I'd say though, that if one was finding themselves in a situation where the Catholic faith was being taught, where it wasn't being taught properly, probably the best thing to do would be to move to a place where it was being taught properly. I understand that in some areas it's very difficult for that sort of thing, and there are movements of people associated with whether you want to call them the left and the right. You mentioned the Society of St Pius X and liberal progressive groups, and ever since, if I give like a very brief sketchy overview from Vatican II, you got the people who view basically Vatican II as a decisive break from the history of the church. You could split that group up into two groups: the left, who view it as a break for the better, for a new church, a better church, one open to change and to identify all these issues. And then you've also got the right, which are also view it as a decisive break, but a break for the worse, the Society of different groups and things like that. But then you've got the people who view Vatican II as a continuation of the work of the Holy Spirit throughout time. And if you're Catholic, you believe that councils, although not being omniscient, they can't tell exactly what's going to happen, they can't see everything, but they are infallible. And by virtue of that, you know that what they say is true, even though some of the documents may have been written in a spirit of maybe evangelical naivety that may have been misused by people later. But I think that what we have to do in these sorts of situations is to make the church relevant to the modern age. That's what one of the things of Vatican II was. Aggiornamento, or I probably can't say it properly, Catherine could probably pronounce it better than me. But it's also resourcement as well, and that's mean returning to the sources. So whenever we discuss the issue of the Catholic faith in areas where you've got liberalism and a kind of very conservative, right, discontinuant type view, the best thing to do is not to kind of run away from the extremes, but to go to the centre. And the centre of that is the Catholic faith that is viewed continuously down the line of time. In that sense, it's very difficult to stay in some areas and to fight the battle. In some areas, it's very difficult to do that, and I admire people who have stayed in those sorts of things. But in some sense, we have to really, if we honestly believe that the Catholic faith is a true faith and that the Church of Christ subsists in the Catholic Church, that is, that the Catholic Church is the fullness of the faith and the fullness of truth, then we cannot abandon that and really go somewhere else. I really think that we have to kind of fight that good fight in whatever way, whether that be through moving, whether it be contacting the relevant authorities and telling them about sort of things happen. But I think it's great that you've been able to identify the unorthodoxy that has been happening in some areas. But by the very fact of you recognising the unorthodoxy, you're also recognising orthodoxy in its pure form. So in that sense, I think you can still grab for that true sense of the Christian message. And as a Catholic, we believe that is the Catholic faith. So we have to hold on to that. I hope I kind of answered you. Cool.
Down the back there, yep.
Hey Pat, just something you said really struck me, which was, I can't remember who the quote was from, but how we're not saints purely because we don't wholly desire that. I was wondering if you could just expand on that and explain what you mean by that.
Yeah, sure. Well, it was a quote that I heard from, I think, William Laws, and I just kind of think it's a bit of an indictment because a lot of the time, like we're all like, yeah, to be a saint would be cool, like, yeah. But then when it comes down to like the present, like all of us think of it as like a future thing. Like I'm like, I want to be a saint. And they're like, right now? Oh, no, maybe not right now. But after I do this thing, it's like what St. Augustine said, Lord, make me chaste, not right now. But, it's that sort of thing where we kind of a bit apprehensive at giving God our finger, thinking that he'll take our entire hand.